Welcome to Milk Market Tidbit for the February Dairy Products Report that USDA released on Friday afternoon. This is Dr. Lawrence Jones with Farm Institute, and I'm recording this on Saturday afternoon, April the 6th. All right, so we had the milk production report followed by the cold storage report and then the dairy products report. And what I was expecting was cheese production to be flat. And again, I'm looking at month over month numbers, not year over year. So we got to make sure that everything I'm talking about is month over month. And butter production might increase just slightly, less than 1,000,000 pounds. So what did we get? Cheese production actually increased 10 million pounds compared to last month. And then butter production actually decreased almost 6 million pounds. So there's quite a bit of difference in that. So how did we figure all this out? So we're going to look first at cheese. We're putting everything on a 30-day month. Let's get rid of the fact that there's 31 in January and 29 in February. Just get rid of all that stuff. So when we looked at how we typically would increase cheese production from January to February, I thought a little bit less milk would be used for cheese because you tend to increase a little bit of ice cream, yogurt, and a few other things. So I had cheese basically the same. Now, the difference is StoneX had it at quite a bit higher, at 1.18 billion, where I had it 1.16. So when we got it in at 1.172, it was a little bit of a head scratcher. A little bit more milk went into cheese, and so I said this is up. But what StoneX is going to say is that this is down. And so where you stand depends upon where you set. Cheese production, again on a 30-day number, I had it pretty well flat, up just a little bit, and that's because butter was going to represent about 21% of the fat. Well, fat actually came down a little bit, and butter only represented about 20%. So we saw a significant reduction in the 30-day average down to 204 million versus 210. So we look at all of the graphs here, which might help kind of explain everything. This is the ratio of cheese to milk, and using 10 pounds of milk to make a pound of cheese, we can assume that about 62.6% of the milk went into making cheese. That came in right on top of the seasonal adjusted level. Now, I always got to go back and tell you what is the seasonal adjusted level. That is taking the month before and comparing it to all the months before and saying how did it change normally, over time. And so right now we were right where we expected it to be. If we look at daily cheese production, was right on top of the seasonal adjusted numbers, but there's something that's starting to develop here. It looks like we've been relatively flat in cheese production for the last 3 years. And if we actually go back and draw a straight line back here, we were flat for about 3 years here. So what is the difference between here and here? That's basically a cheese plant. So we've added a cheese plant. Now we're going to add some more. So that means we're going to be popping up in production. This is my most favorite graph out of all of this because I think it tries to pull everything together, which is a rolling disappearance. So what we do is take the last 12 months and say how much cheese we put into cold storage, how much did we make, what is the difference. And so what this is telling me is that there's 38 days of surplus cheese in cold storage based on our usage at this point. And our rolling demand is around 38,500,000 and change. We're actually producing 38,700,000 and change. That's why you see the black line slightly above the blue line. It says that we're making more cheese than is disappearing. An interesting number also came out. It says if we get all these things to fall in line, we need 9.36 million cows. Right now we're at 9.33. That's all within the margin of error of everything. So this is telling me that basically demand has been more or less flat or decreasing a little bit. We're probably supplying a little more cheese than is disappearing, and we have enough cows to meet this demand. The other graph that comes out of this is the percentage of cheese. So Italian is always the highest. It's been declining, but it actually came up a little bit this month. American, which is including cheddar, usually is about 40%, and it's increasing just a little bit, and that came down this month as a percentage. Cheddar itself is around 29%. Came down off that trend line a little bit, and the other cheeses came up. So it says proportionally we made more Italian and other cheeses than we did American and cheddar. So if we look at the daily cheddar production, it was down off the seasonal numbers just a little bit, and you can see that this has been off the trend line quite a bit. Cheddar production was right where we expected it to be on the seasonal number. Again, down quite a bit, but that down started quite a while ago. So we have to look at how we're performing the last month. Italian cheeses were also down just a little bit off that seasonal number. And then we've had spot cheeses during February of around $1.60. And so that's what all this is kind of relating to. Now, since then, we've had a significant drop in spot cheese price in March. Now, we had this rally on Friday, and in my weekly podcast, I'm going to dig into how that happened a bit more. And again, if you want to subscribe to that weekly podcast, it's only $200 a year. Comes out on Sunday afternoon, and we talk in depth about some philosophical things like what happened on that Friday spot market. If we look at whey, it was down just a little bit, and we've been looking at the whey spot prices continuing to fall, and they're in that 38 to 39 price at this point. Now we turn to butter. Butter production is always very seasonal. The amount of fat that's represented is very seasonal. That came off of the seasonal number, but it's right on the trend line, so that's not at all surprising. And one of the things that's driving this whole butter production is the fat percentages, which has just been going up. This is from the egg prices. 4.3 is what we had this last month across the nation. Again, the daily butter production is very seasonal, and that was just off of that seasonal number just a little bit, but not anything major. If we look at non-fat dry milk, it actually came up, and one of the reasons that I like to look at this is butter can be made two different ways. One by skimming cream off of other things like whole milk, or by a butter powder plant that's skimming cream off to make non-fat dry milk. So non-fat dry milk went up quite a bit this month. And I was looking at last month, what is the ratio of butter to non-fat dry milk? And this is coming back down to the number that we would have expected. Still very high, but it was climbing at an exponential rate, and that stopped this month. And then the other thing I'd like to look at is the value of butter relative to the value of non-fat dry milk. And I thought this would actually kind of settle in here, but it's been on a rip here for the last few days. So right now I've got class 4 kind of as a big picture number. I brought butter up to $2.80, non-fat dry milk around $1.15, which calculates out to a 1960 class 4. One of the reasons that I haven't taken butter up to that $3 like the trade has is these cream multiples. They are still at 1.24. Last time we had butter really strong, those cream multiples were 2 and higher. That says that cream is more or less readily available. Ice cream production was right where we expected it to be. It's coming up this time of year, again very seasonal, below trend line just a little bit. Yogurt production wasn't as strong as we thought it to be, but again closer to trend line, so things have regressed back to trend line quite a bit off of the seasonal numbers. This next week we'll get a crop progress report. On Monday we started getting those. In April here we're going to get the National Dairy Sales Report, which is the first one for April. And then on Thursday is going to be a big day for crops. We're going to have the crop production and WASDE report as well as the cow slaughter numbers. And then we'll start getting the statistical uniform prices on Friday. That tends to take at least until the following Monday before we get those released.